Now, the first thing to understand about quotes in the first century is that they were not used the same way that we use quotes today. So today, if you're writing a piece of literature and you quote another author, you're going to quote exactly the words that you want your reader to know. So if that's multiple paragraphs or that's just one sentence, you're going to quote the entire work that you want people to know. In that time, they had a thing that they called metalepsis. And part of it had to do with just the availability of parchment and how much paper you could write on. But what they would do is they would quote a small portion of a text and expect that you would know the larger context of that short quote that they would give. So it seems that Jesus is doing this in this case as well. Now, you don't need to know what metalepsis is, but you do need to understand that when he quotes a den of robbers, for example, he's expecting you to go back and understand all of what's going on in Jeremiah 7 and 8. Or when he says, my house will be a house of prayer for all nations, he expects you to know all of what's going on in Isaiah 56. And maybe just as an aside, we have this thing that our culture thinks that we modern people, we're way smarter than all those ancient people. But can you see the brilliance in this? Like, as people who today read quotes that are totally taken out of context, their assumption was that if I quote somebody, you should go look at the context. Turns out they were pretty sharp. So let's go back and look at the context. Jesus says that you have made the temple into a den of robbers. So what is he referencing? Well, that whole long section from Jeremiah, right? And what was Jeremiah saying? Jeremiah was saying, look, you have this temple that you guys worship at, and you're treating it as, well, a given. That it's just always going to be here, no matter how you live. If you're oppressing the poor, or you're taking advantage of the widow and the orphan, you're living in sexual immorality, or you are worshiping other gods, you're making sacrifices to gods that you do not know. And yet you continue to just think, I'm just going to leave my temple here as some sort of blank check for you. That I'm always going to leave my power on you when you don't care about me and what I say one bit. And so what does Jeremiah say? He says, the temple is going to be destroyed. I'm going to take away my temple. I'm going to push you out of this land because you don't care about what I say anymore. And your preachers are no better, right? He says the priests and the prophets, they say, peace, peace, everything's good. And it's not good. They say, you know what, you're doing okay. It's not that bad. God isn't that angry with you. When God really is against your sin. It turns out this really happened. In 586 BC, the Babylonian Empire came in and destroyed the temple in Jerusalem and drove God's people out into exile. And so when Jesus says this quote, the den of robbers quote, essentially what he's saying is because of the behavior that I see here in this temple, behavior that simply does not care that God is in this place or that God is speaking, but is licentious, is giving into every sensuality, is doing whatever we want without care for what God says, I am going to destroy this temple. And it turns out he did. In 70 AD, about 40 years after these words were spoken, the Romans completely destroyed the temple. And it has not been rebuilt to this day.